Welcome to the Midnight Street.
The Last Melody. Part 2, The Price of Grief. The coffee was exceptional. Vincent noticed this in the distracted way that people notice small details when their attention is occupied by something considerably larger. Peripherally, without intention, the information arriving and registering without being sought. He was holding the cup. The coffee inside it was the best he had tasted in recent memory, possibly the best he had ever tasted. And he was aware of this fact in approximately the same way he was aware of the ambient temperature of the room and the precise quality of the amber light above the counter. What occupied the rest of his attention was the record. Twilight Waltz, dark crimson sleeve, silver lettering, black vinyl visible at its edges where the sleeve did not fully cover it. It rested on the counter between himself and Elias with the settled presence of something that had been placed exactly where it intended to be and was in no hurry to be anywhere else. He had touched it for perhaps 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, something had whispered his name in a voice he had been losing by degrees for 11 months and had been terrified of losing completely. He looked at Elias. Elias was looking, or doing whatever the pale blue unfocused version of looking was that Elias did, toward the shelves across the store with the expression of someone allowing another person the time they need to arrive at a question. "What did I just hear?" Vincent asked. "What did it sound like?" Elias replied. "It sounded like my wife." "Yes. She is dead." "Yes." Vincent set the cup down. "What is this record?" Elias did not answer immediately. He moved along the counter with the unhurried fluency that Vincent had already identified as his primary mode of existing in space. Not the careful movement of someone compensating for an absence, but the movement of someone for whom the room presented itself cooperatively. The shelves and counters and customers arranging themselves around him, rather than requiring him to navigate around them. "Tell me something first," Elias said. He stopped at the far end of the counter and turned, not toward Vincent exactly, but oriented toward him in the way that suggested full attention without the mechanics of eye contact. "Have you ever considered that grief is not merely an emotion?" Vincent looked at him. "I have just heard my dead wife's voice emerge from a vinyl record," he said. "I am not currently disposed toward philosophy." "All the best philosophy," Elias replied, with the ease of someone producing a line they have used before and find consistently accurate, "arrives at inconvenient moments. That is rather the point of it. The convenient moments are already accounted for." From the entrance, where Oliver had stationed himself with his record cases and his coffee and his expression of controlled exasperation, came a sound, not quite a word, the sound a person makes when they have opinions about a situation and are exercising restraint about expressing them that costs something. Elias glanced briefly in his direction. "Oliver." "I haven't said anything," Oliver said. "You are thinking with considerable volume. I cannot be held responsible for the audibility of my thoughts." And yet here we are. Elias returned his attention to Vincent. "Sit down, Mr. Arden. You have been standing since you touched the record, and your body has not yet communicated to you that it would like to stop. I am communicating it on its behalf." Vincent sat. He had not realized he was standing. Elias refilled his coffee with the attention of someone who considers this act worthy of full engagement. Then he settled against the counter with the posture of a man who has decided that what follows requires a particular quality of stillness. "There was," he said, "an ancient being." He said it simply, not with the lowered voice of someone constructing atmosphere, not with the deliberate packing of a storyteller managing his audience. Simply, as a fact, delivered in the register of facts. Old enough that his origin predates most things currently using the word old to describe themselves. He was not interested in power in the conventional sense, not territory, not dominion, not the accumulation of followers or resources or influence. These things bored him in the specific way that only things one has already fully explored can bore a person. He paused. He was interested in emotions. Vincent waited. Specifically in emotions as forces, Elias continued. Not feelings forces. The distinction matters. A feeling is something experienced. A force is something that acts, that changes the shape of whatever it moves through, that leaves the landscape different after its passage than it was before. He moved along the counter slightly, his fingers trailing the surface with the absent lightness of someone thinking through touch. Grief does not merely hurt, it restructures. It rearranges the internal architecture of the person experiencing it, moves things that were fixed, removes things that seemed permanent, creates spaces where there were none before. Joy expands. Rage clarifies. Fear sharpens. Each emotion has a mechanical reality beneath its experiential surface. He stopped. This being spent a very long time studying these mechanics, collecting examples, building understanding the way other beings build libraries or empires, carefully, over time, with the specific investment of someone who has found the thing that interests them completely and intends to pursue it without reservation. He reached across the counter, touched the edge of the Twilight Waltz sleeve with one gloved finger. Eventually, he distilled what he had learned into 12 records, one for each of the 12 emotions he considered most fundamental, most consequential, most essential to the architecture of any conscious experience. His finger moved along the sleeve's edge. Not the 12 most pleasant emotions, not the 12 most useful, the 12 most powerful, the 12 that, when present in their purest and most concentrated form, change everything they touch. Vincent looked at the record. And the 11th, he said. Grief, Elias confirmed. Or tragedy, if you prefer the cause to the effect. In the case of the 11th record, the distinction is academic. Grief is what tragedy produces, and tragedy is what makes grief inevitable. They are two aspects of a single force, and the 11th record contains both. The store continued around them, the soft movement of customers through aisles, the occasional sound of a record being removed from a shelf or returned to one, the ambient warmth of the amber lighting, and the smell of coffee and old vinyl. All of it carrying on with the patient unconcern of a place that has hosted a great many significant conversations and treats them all with equal composure. What does it do, Vincent asked, when someone listens to it? Elias was quiet for a moment. The quiet of someone selecting their words with particular care, not because they intend to deceive, but because precision matters, and imprecision in this context would be its own kind of dishonesty. It listens first, he said. Before it does anything else, before any sound emerges from the groove, the record listens to whoever is holding it. It reaches, and this is the only word that adequately describes the mechanism, inward, into the listener, finding what is already present. He paused. The deepest grief, the oldest guilt, the regret that sits furthest below the surface because it is too heavy to carry any closer to the top, because bringing it closer would require acknowledging it fully, and full acknowledgement has consequences that most people are not prepared to accept. He looked oriented toward Vincent with the complete attention that served him in place of eye contact. It finds all of that, and then it amplifies it, returns it to the listener at full volume and full clarity, everything that has been carried at a manageable distance, the distance that makes daily functioning possible, suddenly present, unavoidable, immediate, as though the intervening time and the intervening distance had never existed. Vincent was quiet. The coffee had gone slightly cool in the cup without his noticing. That sounds, he said, like a specific and deliberate form of cruelty. For some, Elias agreed. His tone carried no judgment of the assessment. For others, it is the closest approximation of honesty they have ever been offered. The honest version of themselves, the version that knows everything it has chosen not to fully know made audible. And the voice I heard when I touched it. An introduction, Elias said, the record identifying itself, showing you what it has already found in approximately 4 seconds of contact. A slight pause. Showing you what it intends to show you more completely, if given the opportunity. Vincent looked at the record for a long moment. The dark crimson sleeve, the silver lettering, the particular quality of stillness it had, resting on the counter, not the stillness of an inert object, but the stillness of something waiting. Why Lily, he asked. Why did it find her? Elias said nothing. The nothing of someone who considers the question, already answered by everything that has preceded it. Because she is what I am most, Vincent stopped. Started again. Because she is the reason I came here, he said. Yes, Elias said softly. The record found exactly what it was looking for. It always does. In 11 years of having this particular record in my collection, I have never known it to find the wrong thing. Oliver set his record cases on the counter, with a sound that was approximately 30% more emphatic than the physical task required. Both men looked at him. He adjusted his glasses with the precision of someone using a small action to organize a larger set of thoughts. The host, Oliver said, requested that record for this evening. The host, Elias replied, is patient. The host is many things. I would not place patient at the top of the list without qualification. Oliver, I am nodding, Oliver said, with the careful diction of someone constructing a sentence that will be accurate regardless of how it is subsequently interpreted, that the record has a prior engagement. I am nodding it once. I will not note it again. Your restraint is admirable, Elias said. It is costing me something, Oliver replied. Elias looked at him with the expression of someone who finds this genuinely amusing and is not particularly concealing the fact. The host, he said, sent you here at this specific time on this specific evening. The record was here. Mr. Arden was here. These things occurred in the sequence they occurred in. He paused. I suspect the host's interest in the record and his interest in the sequence of events are not unconnected. I further suspect he is not currently experiencing the frustration you are projecting onto him. Oliver looked at Vincent, then at the record, then at Elias with the expression of a man who has worked for someone long enough to recognize when an argument has a predetermined outcome and is deciding whether to spend the energy anyway. He picked up his coffee, said nothing further. Can I listen to it? Vincent asked. He asked it the way people ask questions whose answers they already partially know and are hopping to be either confirmed or corrected. With the specific tension of someone standing at a door they are not certain they want opened. That, Elias said, is more complicated than it appears. It appeared fairly direct. Direct questions and simple questions are not the same thing. Elias moved along the counter again, the slow, thinking movement of someone for whom physical motion and mental processing are connected activities. To listen to one of the 12 records without harm requires a specific level of development in the relevant sense. The records operate at a frequency that interacts directly with the listener's sensory capacity. They do not simply play sound. They communicate at a level that requires the listener to be capable of receiving the communication without the communication doing damage in the process. He paused. The 11th record concerns grief, tragedy. The emotional frequencies it operates at correspond most directly to hearing, to the sense most fundamental to how grief is experienced and expressed and communicated between people. To listen to it safely, a person would need to have reached what I would describe as the auxiliary stage of mastery in that sense, a significant level of development, something that places the listener at a frequency compatible with what the record is doing. Vincent frowned. I don't know what the auxiliary stage means. It means a level of development in a particular sense that most people spend their entire lives without approaching, Elias said simply. It means you have not reached it. Then I can't listen. I did not say that. Elias stopped moving. He turned toward Vincent with the particular quality of attention that meant what followed had been prepared, not scripted, but considered. The difference between something said for the first time and something said after sufficient thought to understand its implications. The records were created with the understanding that most beings who encountered them would not be capable of meeting them on their own terms, he said. This was not an oversight. The ancient being who created them understood precisely what he was making and precisely who would encounter it. He built an alternative into each one. He placed one gloved hand flat on the counter. A price, for those who cannot bring sufficient development to the listening, an offering made in exchange for safe passage. The record accepts the offering, and in exchange permits the listener to hear what it contains without the full force of the unmediated experience destroying them in the process. What kind of price? Vincent asked. And here was the moment that Oliver, across the store, went very still in the specific way of someone who has decided to become architecturally uninvolved in what is currently happening, not looking away, simply still. The stillness of someone who has made a decision about their role in the next several minutes. Elias smiled. The smile was warm, genuine. The smile of someone who is, in this moment, being entirely truthful about certain things and exercising a careful and considered selection about others. Telling the truth the way a surgeon makes an incision precisely, leaving what does not need to be disturbed undisturbed. The records deal in emotions, he said. What they accept as payment is what they work with. Something emotional, something real and present and genuinely costly to part with. Not a performance of cost. The record would know the difference immediately. Something that actually matters. He let this settle into the air between them. The specifics, he added, with the pleasant openness of someone offering information they consider complete, depend on the listener, on what the record has found, on what it considers an appropriate exchange for what it is offering. A slight pause. I cannot tell you precisely what it will ask because I am not the one being asked. The transaction is between you and the record. I am the introduction. Vincent looked at him for a long moment. The look of someone examining a statement for the places where it does not quite cover what it appears to cover. You are being deliberately imprecise, he said. I am being appropriately general, Elias replied. There is a meaningful distinction. Is there? Yes, Elias picked up his own coffee cup. I have told you the record requires a price. I have told you the price will be emotional in nature. I have told you it will be genuine. Everything I have said is accurate. He took a sip. The specifics are between you and the record. Telling you the specifics in advance would interfere with the process. The record needs to find them itself. That is how it works. Vincent was quiet. Across the store, Oliver had developed a sudden and absorbing interest in the spines of the records on the nearest shelf. His back was to the counter. His posture was the posture of a man who is not listening extremely carefully. You said I would hear what it has found, Vincent said. Yes. You said it found Lily. Elias said nothing, which was, Vincent had established, itself a form of confirmation. If I pay the price, Vincent said, whatever it is, I hear her. You hear, Elias said carefully, what the record has found, in full, without the experience tearing through you unprepared. Not confirming, not denying. The surgical precision of someone who has chosen their words to be true, without being complete. Vincent looked at the record, at the dark crimson sleeve on the counter between them. He thought about 11 months, about a piano he could not touch without hearing in it the shape of everything he had lost, about a voice he was forgetting by degrees, the specific register of it, the particular way it said ordinary things, the sound of his name in her mouth on an ordinary morning. About 3 weeks of silence inside an apartment that had once contained music, and now contained only the absence of it. He thought about the invitation card that had appeared on his piano keys, about the shadow on the pavement, about the fog, about the fact that he was sitting in a record store on a street that did not exist on any map, holding a coffee that was inexplicably perfect, being told that a vinyl record made by an ancient being who collected emotions like other beings collected art contained something that had whispered his name in his dead wife's voice. He picked up the record. "Show me the room," he said. The staircase at the back of the last melody was narrow in the way of staircases that were not designed for frequent use, not hidden, not concealed, simply present in the way of a feature that serves a specific purpose and makes no claims beyond that purpose. The walls on either side were shelved to the ceiling, these shelves holding not records but objects, the kind of objects that accumulate in places where significant things happen over long periods of time. Small things. A pocket watch stopped at a specific hour, a pair of reading glasses with one lens removed, a child's shoe, its mate absent, a folded piece of paper that had been folded and unfolded enough times that the creases were soft. Vincent did not look at them closely. Something about them suggested that looking closely was not advisable. Elias moved up the stairs ahead of him with the same complete spatial confidence he brought to everything, each step taken without hesitation, without the slight adjustments of someone reading the space through available sensory information other than sight, as though the staircase presented itself to him as fully legible through whatever means he used in place of conventional vision. The second floor was shelving, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, packed with records whose sleeves Vincent could not read clearly in the lower light, the amber of the ground floor fading here to something dimmer and more directional, pools of warm light between stretches of shadow. Customers moved through the second floor with the same absorbed quality as those below, though here the absorption had a different texture, more deliberate, more careful, the movement of people who understood that what was on these shelves was not ordinary. They continued up. The third floor was different in a way that registered before the specifics of the difference became clear, a felt difference, something in the quality of the air or the acoustic character of the space, or something less definable than either. The walls here were lined with a material that was not shelving and not wallpaper, dark, slightly textured, with a surface that caught light without reflecting it, absorbing rather than returning. The corridor was narrow. 6 doors, 3 on each side, each one dark wood without number or nameplate, identical and unreadable. The sound from below, the faint ambient sound of the store, music and movement, and the occasional soft exchange between customers, did not reach the third floor. Complete quiet. Not the quiet of a space between sounds, the quiet of a space designed to contain them. Elias stopped at the second door on the left. He placed one gloved hand flat against its surface. Not a knock, something more like a greeting, the contact of someone checking in with a space before entering it. Then he opened the door. The room inside was small in the way of rooms designed for single occupancy and a single purpose. A chair at its center, dark wood, simply constructed, with the particular quality of something that has held a great many people over a long time and carries that history in the slight softness of its surfaces. Beside it, a low table. On the table, a record player, old, beautifully maintained, its mechanical components visible through a smoked glass panel on its side, its needle arm resting in its cradle with the patience of something accustomed to waiting. No other furniture. No windows. The walls the same sound-absorbing material as the corridor outside. A single lamp in the corner producing amber light in a contained circle that did not reach the walls. Vincent stepped inside. The room received him with the complete quiet of a space that had been waiting for exactly this. Elias remained at the threshold. "When the record begins," he said, "do not attempt to stop it. Whatever arrives, let it complete. The price is not extracted until the record finishes. Not before, not during, at the moment of completion." Vincent turned to look at him. Elias' pale blue eyes were directed at a point slightly above and to the left of Vincent's head. "What exactly will it take from me?" Vincent asked. The question he had not asked downstairs, because downstairs he had not been standing in a small room with a record player and no windows. Downstairs the question had been theoretical. Here it was not. Elias smiled. The warmth of it was genuine. It was always genuine. Vincent had spent enough time in proximity to Elias to understand that his warmth was not a performance, not a technique deployed for effect. It was real. It simply coexisted with other things that were also real, things that the warmth did not cancel out and did not attempt to. "Something real," Elias said. "Something that costs you genuinely, something the record considers appropriate." He held Vincent's gaze, or held the space where Vincent's gaze was, which amounted to the same thing. "I have told you everything I am able to tell you," he said. "The rest is between you and what is in that sleeve." He pulled the door closed. The sound of it closing was minimal, a soft and final click, the sound of a well-fitted door meeting its frame. And then the quiet of the room was total. Not the quiet of the corridor outside or the quiet of the store below, something more complete than either. A quiet that seemed to have substance, to press gently against the skin, to make the sounds of Vincent's own breathing and heartbeat the loudest things in the available world. He stood still for a moment, the record in his hands, the record player on the table beside the chair, the lamp in the corner, the walls that absorbed rather than reflected. He sat. The chair received him with the softness of long use. He held the record for a moment longer, feeling its weight, which was the weight of vinyl and cardboard and nothing else, which was also somehow the weight of everything Elias had told him about what it contained. Then he removed the vinyl from the sleeve. His hands were not entirely steady. He placed it on the player, lowered the needle. For a moment, nothing. The faint mechanical sound of the needle finding the groove. A breath of static, barely audible, the sound of contact between two surfaces at the beginning of a transaction. Then music. Not what Vincent had expected, not the dramatic arrival of something that knew its own significance. Something quieter, a single piano line, moving at the pace of something that understands it, has all the time it needs, and is not interested in efficiency. Each note placed with the care of someone who has thought about this note specifically, and determined that it is exactly the note that belongs here and nowhere else. The line repeated, varied slightly, found a second line beneath it, lower, moving in the opposite direction with the patient inevitability of something that was always going to arrive at this particular relationship with the first line, had been moving toward it from the beginning. Vincent sat in the chair and listened. He was aware at the edges of his attention that the music was doing something beyond being music, that it was moving through him in a way that sound does not ordinarily move, finding passages in him that sound does not ordinarily find. Not painful, not intrusive, the way water finds the shape of whatever contains it completely, without force, simply by being present. Then the music changed. Not in volume, not in tempo, in depth, as though it had been operating at one level of the available frequency and had now found access to a lower one, a frequency below what Vincent would have described as sound, something felt in the chest and the spine rather than heard through the ears, something that interacted with him at a level below the conscious. And everything arrived, not gradually, not with the merciful packing of something that understands the value of preparation. All at once, the concert hall, the particular smell of it, hundreds of people, expensive perfume, the warm electrical smell of stage lighting at full intensity, the producer's hand on his shoulder backstage, the weight of it, the confidence of it, the smile that meant the biggest performance of his career was 40 minutes away. Lily beside him, her hand in his, the green dress she had worn because he had told her it was his favorite, which was also true in the specific way that things can be true for reasons that contain other less comfortable truths within them. She was beautiful. She was always beautiful. She was beautiful in a way that opened rooms, that made people generous, that caused conversations to extend and invitations to multiply. He had known this. He had known this and had felt, beneath his love for her, which was genuine, which was real, which he had never doubted, a small and quiet relief, a convenience, the specific comfort of someone who has discovered that a thing they love also serves a purpose and has elected not to examine the serving too closely because the examination would require a response that costs something. The memory arrived with the full weight of the thing he had refused to feel about it at the time. The producer later. The comment about Lily, delivered with the casualness of something offered as a pleasantry that was not a pleasantry. The implication beneath it, thin, deniable, the kind of implication that requires active effort to perceive and active effort to ignore, and is therefore available to both responses equally. Vincent had perceived it. He had stood in that backstage corridor with the producer's hand on his shoulder, and the biggest concert of his career 40 minutes away, and he had perceived the implication. And he had looked away from it. Not consciously, not with the deliberate decision of someone choosing complicity, with the practiced, fluent, entirely unexamined ease of someone who has developed, over time, the ability to not know things that are inconvenient to know. He had looked away, and then the music had started. The memory arrived with the specific and devastating clarity of something that has been waiting a long time for full acknowledgement and is not interested in partial versions. Then her voice, not the whisper from the record store floor below, not the brief and fragmented preview that had frozen him in place and sent his hands to the sleeve. Her voice, complete, the full specific register of it, the particular warmth in its lower frequencies, the specific way it shaped certain vowels, the exact quality he had been losing by degrees for 11 months and had been terrified of losing completely. Vincent. The room felt smaller. Not visibly, the walls had not moved, the lamp had not changed, the chair was still the chair. Something internal. The acoustic space of the room contracting slightly around the sound of his name in her voice. Why didn't you save me? He opened his mouth. No sound came out. You knew, Lily's voice said. Not angry. He could have managed anger. Anger had an edge you could push back against, a surface you could locate yourself in relation to. This was not anger. This was certainty. The quiet, absolute certainty of someone who has arrived at a conclusion through a process they consider complete. You knew what he wanted. You knew what he was asking. You felt it and you understood it, and you chose not to understand it because understanding it fully would have meant doing something about it. I didn't know what he would, Vincent said, to the empty room, to the voice from the record, to the version of Lily that the record had constructed from what it had found in him. I didn't know he would. You knew enough, her voice said. Not louder, not more insistent, simply more present. The presence of something that has waited for this conversation and is not in any hurry now that it has arrived. You knew enough and you chose not to know the rest, because the rest would have cost you the concert. The music beneath her voice had changed, still the same piano line. Still the same patient movement, but lower now, the lower frequency more present, more felt than heard. I waited, Lily's voice said. A pause. For the whole time that I was waiting for you to understand what was happening, I was waiting for you to choose me. The music continued. I thought you would. Another pause, longer. You were performing. The needle reached the end of the groove. The music stopped. The room returned to its complete and absorbing quiet. The quiet that had substance, that pressed gently, that made his own breathing the loudest available sound. Vincent sat in the chair, his hands on his knees, his breathing doing something uneven and irregular that he was not fully managing. He had not cried. He was not certain why. The thing in his chest was too large for crying, too complete, the way certain weights are too heavy to lift and too heavy to put down and simply have to be stood beneath. Then something changed in the room. Not sound, not light, not temperature. Presence. Something making itself known in the space between the end of the music and whatever came next, patient, unhurried. The presence of something that has been waiting through the entire record for exactly this moment and is now simply here. The price, making itself known, not demanding, not threatening, with the quiet certainty of something that has already been agreed to that simply requires confirmation. Vincent felt it, understood it, not as a communication in words, but as a comprehension that arrived complete. The way you understand the layout of a room when the lights come on, all at once, without having to work it out piece by piece. He understood what the record wanted. He understood what paying would mean, what he would lose, the specific and devastating completeness of it. He sat in the small room on the third floor of the last Melody on Midnight Street beneath a crimson moon that watched everything, with the record at the end of its groove on the player beside him, and the price fully present in the room with him, waiting. He had come here for Lily. He had come here because he was forgetting the sound of her voice, because the silence in his apartment had become unbearable, because 11 months of grief had hollowed something in him that music had once filled, and now nothing filled, and he had followed a card that appeared on his piano keys to a street that did not exist because he had run out of other directions. He had come here for Lily, and the price of finding her, the price of hearing her voice, of having the record show him what it had found in him, of understanding with full and unambiguous clarity what his convenient not knowing had cost, was Lily. Not the grief, not the guilt, not the weight of what he had chosen not to know on a night backstage in a concert hall, while the biggest performance of his career waited 40 minutes away. Sorry. The memory of her entirely, the sound of her voice, the specific register of it that he had been terrified of losing gone, the particular way she laughed, the green dress, the hand in his, the muse beneath the lover, the source beneath the music, the thing that had made everything he had ever composed worth composing. All of it, gone. He would wake from this room functional. He would return to his apartment. He would sit at his piano. He would not be able to remember why the silence hurt. He sat in the chair in the silent room and did not move. The presence of the price waited with him. Patient, certain, in no hurry. And Vincent Arden, the man who could make grief sound beautiful, the man who had followed a cold black card to a street beneath a crimson moon, the man who had sat in a chair in a small room and heard his dead wife ask him why he had not saved her, made no decision. Not yet. The price waited. The record rested at the end of its groove. The lamp in the corner held its amber circle against the dark, and the quiet of the room pressed gently against him from every direction, waiting to see what he would choose.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more stories.